So ये जो endogenetic forces हैं, ये कहाँ से emanate हो रहे हैं? They are being created in the Earth's interior. And why are they being created? Well, to be very true, humankind's understanding with respect to the interior of the Earth is very meager, because we have not gone to a great depth in the Earth. बहुत shallow areas ही हमने बस explore किया है. In fact, as we increase the depth in the interior of the Earth, both the pressure and temperature increases. The endogenetic forces are variability developers, either elevated features or depressed features. Variability का मतलब है some difference in terms of height or depth. अगर आप यहाँ से देखोगे तो there is some height of this landform. This is a valley, say perhaps, and you can see there is some depth with respect to this landform. When we say factors affecting landform evolution, we are actually talking about what are the forces that affect the evolution of landforms. Landform का मतलब क्या होता है? Very simply, आप इसी word को तोड़ लो. Landform is any form of land. Let's say, for example, the mountain is a landform, the plateau is a landform, the plains are landform. So, what is landform? A landform is any form of land. When we have a large number of similar or dissimilar landforms aggregated over a surface, we call it the landscape. Like say, for example, can I say mountains can be landforms? Mountains are landforms. Similarly, valleys are also landforms. And suppose I have parallel mountain ranges and parallel valleys, then I would say that this is an entire landscape. So what is a landscape? A landscape is a collection of one or more than one kind of landforms. Like the Mount Everest is a landform, but the entire Himalayan region is the Himalayan landscape. तो ये जो particular landform है, वो कैसे बनते हैं या कैसे वो बिखरते हैं, और how do landforms evolve? That is what we will try to understand. A very important topic. You will see direct questions from this topic in the preliminary examination, and I'll take one question from previous years so as to highlight that how this topic has been asked in the previous years. तो बहुत ध्यान से सुनो इसको. In fact, when we say factors, we are actually saying the forces that affect landform evolution. There are two kinds of forces that affect landform evolution. The first force is the endogenetic force, and the second force is the exogenetic force. Now, simply put, the endogenetic forces are those forces which create the landforms, whereas the exogenetic forces are those forces that destroy the landforms. Endogenetic forces are forces which emanate or generate from the interior of the earth. मतलब earth के अंदर से ये forces आते हैं, and they are responsible for the creation of landforms. जैसे mountain बन गया, plateau बन गया, valley बन गई कोई, or any kind of other landform which is being created. It is always created due to endogenetic forces. What is the source of endogenetic forces? The source of endogenetic forces is the Earth's interior. So I can write this, that endogenetic forces are those forces which create the landforms. And you understand what do we mean by landforms. And these are the forces which generate from the Earth's interior. In fact, the word endo means something to do with the interior, whereas the word exo means something to do with the exterior. So, endogenetic forces are those forces which create the landforms and which emanate or generate from the Earth's interior. कैसे generate होते हैं? We'll talk about it in a moment. Exogenetic forces are those forces which destroy the landforms, or we can say these are forces which are destroyers as they destroy the landforms. Which landforms? Those landforms which are created by the endogenetic forces. The source of exogenetic forces is the Earth's atmosphere. It means these forces, they ultimately generate from the Earth's atmosphere. अब देखो एक illustration के through हम इन दोनों forces को समझते हैं. Suppose this is the surface of the Earth. From the interior of the Earth, suppose there is a force which is working, and this force is pushing the Earth's crust up, and therefore you see that a mountain has been created. So endogenetic forces are variability developers. Variability means difference in terms of height. If there is no variability, then we would say that that's a plane surface or without any kind of differences in terms of height. But if you have a surface where you have some differences in terms of height or depth, we would say that there is some sort of variability in it. Or you can think of this, that the force is acting like this. It means towards the center. So which was acting towards the surface, it was having a pushing effect on the surface of the Earth. But which is acting towards the center, it is having a pulling effect on the surface of the Earth. And you can understand that a part of the Earth's surface is supposed it is pulled in this direction. This is also a variability. Do you understand that? So the endogenetic forces are variability developers, either elevated features or depressed features. Variability का मतलब है some difference in terms of height or depth. अगर आप यहाँ से देखोगे तो there is some height of this landform. This is the valley, say perhaps, and you can see there is some depth with respect to this landform. Do you understand that? Who is responsible, or what is responsible rather, for the creation of these variabilities over the surface of the Earth? It is the endogenetic forces which are responsible for the development of such variabilities over the surface of the Earth. Exogenetic forces are those forces that destroy the landforms which are created by the endogenetic forces. Now think of this, that suppose there are clouds and there is rainfall, and you can understand that there would be surface runoff. Now this surface runoff, if it keeps on going, or suppose there is a river which is flowing over this landform, with time you can understand that the river will continue to erode the landform, the mountain, and would plane the surface again, or it would destroy the variability. Variability is change in terms of height or depth. It will destroy that variability. Similarly, you can understand कि जो भी material erode करेगा the river, that river will take the eroded material and will deposit it in some depression, which was again a variability. And you can understand, again it would create more or less the plane surface. It means the exogenetic forces, you see, because this running water which is destroying the landforms is emerging from the Earth's atmosphere. That's why we are saying that these are exogenetic forces. The exogenetic forces which destroy the landforms are actually levelers. So the endogenetic forces are variability developers, be it an elevated form or a depressed form, कैसे भी variability. The endogenetic forces are responsible for it. And the exogenetic forces are levelers. It means they create the plane surface one more time. Do you understand that? The source of the endogenetic forces is the Earth's interior, whereas the source of the exogenetic forces is the Earth's atmosphere. What is the force behind the generation of endogenetic forces? Because you know that energy can neither be created nor it can be destroyed. It can be only transformed from one form to another. So ये जो endogenetic forces हैं, ये कहाँ से emanate हो रहे हैं? They are being created in the Earth's interior. And why are they being created? Well, to be very true, humankind's understanding with respect to the interior of the Earth is very meager, because we have not gone to a great depth in the Earth. बहुत shallow areas ही हमने बस explore किया है. In fact, as we increase the depth in the interior of the Earth, both the pressure and temperature increases. It is easy to travel to the surface of the sun than to travel to the interior core of the Earth. But having said that, most of the geologists believe that the reason behind the generation of endogenetic forces is the internal heat of the Earth. The internal heat of the Earth is responsible for the generation of endogenetic forces. अब देखो, जब हम ये बोलते हैं that it is Earth's internal heat which is responsible for the generation of endogenetic forces, we must also highlight that how this heat is being produced. Now, this heat is produced mostly due to three events or due to three factors. The first factor is the super incumbent load of the rocks. The second factor is the presence of radioactive minerals. And the third factor is gravity transfers. Now, what do we understand by this? Look at this. Suppose this is the surface of the Earth. As we move towards the interior of the Earth, or we travel to greater depths of the Earth, can I say that the number of overlying layers of rocks are increasing? This overlying load of rocks in geography is known as the superincumbent load. मतलब जितनी गहराई में आप जाओगे, जो रॉक के लेयर्स हैं वो बढ़ते जाएंगे. Due to the weight of those rocks, or due to the weight of the layers of those rocks, what happens is that there is generation of pressure. क्योंकि if you apply load or weight, there is generation of pressure. And whenever there is pressure, there is heat. Like say for example, if I put my hand over this hand and if I put pressure on it, you can see there is generation of heat. You can try it on your own. Whenever there is application of pressure, there is generation of heat. तो हो सकता है that the superincumbent load of the rocks is responsible for the generation of the internal heat of the Earth. And this internal heat is responsible for the creation of the endogenetic forces, which are creating variabilities over the surface of the Earth, either elevated or depressed variabilities. It is also found that at certain depths in Earth, there is presence of radioactive minerals. They are found in several places in the Earth's interior. Now, these radioactive minerals are actually those minerals which disintegrate with time, and such disintegration is known as radioactive disintegration. जब भी radioactive disintegration होता है, you see there is a release of radiation. These radiations are alpha, beta, gamma kind of radiations. These radiations generate heat. So what am I saying? That there is presence of radioactive minerals in the interior of the Earth at several locations and at several depths. These radioactive minerals, they decay with time, and emit radiations in the form of alpha, beta, gamma kind of radiations. These radiations generate heat. तो एक तो ये reason हो सकता है that the superincumbent load of the rocks is generating pressure, that pressure is generating heat, which is creating the endogenetic forces. Or there can be another possibility in which we can think that there is presence of radioactive minerals. These radioactive minerals disintegrate with time and emit radiations in the form of alpha, beta, gamma, and these generate the heat. Either of these two heats, the endogenetic forces are created, or due to both of them, who knows, because I already told you that our knowledge about the Earth's interior is very meager. The third reason, possible reason, what geologists and geomorphologists mostly believe is it can be gravity transfers. What do we mean by gravity transfers? You see, that in fact when the Earth was created, we will talk about the origin of the Earth, the evolution of the Earth, the latitudes and longitudes in more detail in the next class. But today just think of this, that if we think of the Earth when it was created 4.6 billion years ago, when it is believed that the Earth came into existence, the Earth was mostly in a molten state. That Earth was known as the primordial Earth. Now this primordial Earth was in molten state, and in molten states you understand that materials can move, like in solid materials cannot move or the molecules cannot move, but if it is in molten state it will move. Like say for example, if this marker which is in solid state, if I keep it here, it will not move, but if suppose I melt this, then some molecules may move. Do you understand that? Movement of molecules is possible in liquids and gases, but it is not possible in solids. So the primordial Earth was in molten state. This is lava hota hai. It was more or less in that state. Do you understand that? And therefore what happened is that the molecules moved. The heavier molecules, or the heavier elements rather, they moved towards the interior of the Earth, and the lighter elements moved towards the surface of the Earth. And thus the Earth was divided into different layers based on the density of the materials. ऐसा होगा ही होगा. Like say for example, you have two liquids in a container, liquid A and liquid B, and you pour liquid A first, and then above it you pour liquid B. Suppose the density of liquid B is more than that of liquid A. What would happen in the container? Liquid B would sink and liquid A would rise and rest over liquid B. Do you understand that? But if suppose this duster, it has a greater density than the cap of this marker, but if I keep it over the cap of the marker, it will not sink and the cap of the marker will not rise. Why is that? Because these are both solids, and in solids molecules cannot move, but in molten state definitely molecules can move. So dekho, when the primordial Earth was in molten state, what happened was heavier elements, they moved towards the interior of the Earth, and lighter elements moved towards the surface of the Earth. So jab heavy element niche move hoga, you can understand this movement was mostly due to gravity. As it impacted on each other, you can understand there was collision of different elements, and these collision generated heat. This heat is known as gravity transfer heat. Do you understand that? तो हो सकता है अर्थ के अंदर जो heat है, that is either due to the superincumbent load of the rocks, or due to the disintegration of radioactive minerals, or due to the gravity transfers that have happened. कोई भी reason हो, कुछ भी हो सकता है इनमें से कोई एक हो या तीनों हो. Most probably we can say that it is perhaps these three together and maybe something else, because our knowledge, as I told you, is very less with respect to the interior of the Earth. Nevertheless, whatever be the case for the generation of heat, one thing is definitely true, that the endogenetic forces are created due to this heat. Do you understand that? Now look at the exogenetic forces. The exogenetic forces are those forces which destroy the landforms, or which level the surface one more time. That's why they are known as levelers. These kind of forces, they emanate from the Earth's atmosphere, and the Earth's atmosphere must also have a source of energy which is driving it. In fact, if you look at the Earth's atmosphere, you will find then the atmosphere mostly receives energy from the sun. So here also heat is responsible for the generation of the exogenetic forces. In endogenetic forces case, the heat is the internal heat of the Earth, whereas in the exogenetic forces case, it is sun's heat which is directly or indirectly responsible for the generation of the exogenetic forces. एक बार फिर ध्यान से सुनो यहाँ पर. I'm saying that there are two kinds of forces that affect the evolution of landforms, the endogenetic forces and the exogenetic forces. The endogenetic forces are the creators of landforms. They are variability developers, and they emanate from the Earth's interior. The internal heat of the Earth is responsible for their generation. The reason for the internal heat is either the superincumbent load or the radioactive minerals presence or the gravity transfers which have happened in the Earth's early history when the Earth was in a molten state, which is known as the primordial Earth. This arrangement of elements on the basis of their weight or density which happened in the primordial Earth is known as the process of differentiation. Though we will talk about it in more detail in the upcoming classes, but you know that today the Earth has three important layers in terms of density. The first layer is silica and aluminium, which is known as the sialic layer. Then we have silica and magnesium, which is the simic layer. And finally, we have nickel and iron, which is the internal layer of the Earth. Or we have a trispherical concentric structure of the Earth. The तीन spheres हैं, उन तीनों का center same है. That's why it is trispherical concentric structure of the Earth made up of different layers, Sial, Sima and Nife. इन्होंने अपने आप को arrange कर लिया है, and that arrangement happened during the Earth's early history. This process of arrangement was known as the process of differentiation, and this differentiation was caused due to gravity, and this gravity caused the generation of heat.